Welcome to Central News on TV Central. There have been a couple of fines handed down to farmers for poor effluent management recently. So I caught up with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's Pollution Prevention Manager to find out how the situation is in the Bay and what are good ways to manage effluent. So first off, for those who don't know, what is effluent?
Well, effluent is essentially a liquid waste from a process or an activity. When we're talking about dairy effluent, it's a combination of feces and urine from the cow and also washed down water from the milking process and from the dairy yard.
What is the correct way that farmers are actually meant to dispose of effluent?
Well, farmers are, the best way to manage effluent is as per your consent conditions. Essentially that's, or normally that's an irrigation to pasture through some form of irrigation system or through a contract spreader.
Can you talk us through the basics of an effluent system?
The effluent system will be very much dependent on the individual farm. So you have to consider how many cows are actually being milked, the soil types on the farm, the slope of the land, the drainage, and there are a lot of industry advisors out there to give farmers the best advice of what's a suitable system. It's important to have low application rates to avoid runoff and to ensure that you have enough storage that farmers can get the effluent onto the land in the correct weather conditions.
If this is not disposed of correctly, what environmental impact can it have?
Well, if effluent isn't disposed of correctly, we get it in our, we have it in our streams, in our rivers, in our estuaries, which can have, impacts on the in terms of swimming, recreational use, drinking water, water for stock use. Also, dairy effluent has a particularly high ammonia content, which can cause effects on aquatic life. If it's strong enough, it can cause fish kills, and the actual nitrates in dairy effluent can cause algal blooms and contaminate groundwaters. What are the legal repercussions if we don't dispose of effluent properly? Well, if you're sticking to your consent and you have a good irrigation system in place and you're farming responsible, there are no sort of legal implications of having a good process. When effluent isn't disposed of correctly, then there is a potential, depending on the severity of the discharge, but for low levels of non-compliance, fines and at the top end, potential prosecutions. Will the drought be causing any more problems with effluent management? Well, at present, we're disposing of effluent onto land. I mean, the soil is quite dry at the moment, so there's quite a large soil moisture deficit, so it should be able to absorb more effluent onto the land. It's very difficult with these drought conditions, and a lot of farmers, unfortunately, would have had to dry off their cows, so they're not actually discharging effluent at present. What is it that makes cows' effluent more recyclable other than other species? Other species, have good fertiliser value. For example, horse manure, you can use it. I suppose what makes cows' effluent or waste quite easy is in that it's a liquid waste, and it's from a small area from the dairy shed, and you can actually easily collect that, in a pond system and spread it onto land. Is it because they eat grass? Does it have something to do with their diet? If you're thinking of human effluents, then there's potential for pathogens in that, which is not usually an issue for cow effluent if it's been irrigated onto land. Is there a large problem in the Bay of Plenty? No, no. In general, a lot of farmers are farming responsibly, and there isn't really a huge problem. Are there laws that are specific to the Bay of Plenty region? Well, in the Bay of Plenty, we have our regional water and land plan that sets out rules and policies about effluent disposal, and effectively those are translated in the consents that we issue. Are there cases that stand out in particular that you can tell us about? Well, this year has been quite a good year for farming. We've seen a good improvement. We have about 700 farms in our region. We inspected about 300 this season, and 74%, nearly 75% of farms were fully compliant with all their consent conditions. And in terms of the most significant discharges or non-compliant discharges, that actually decreased 3%. So it's been a good year. There's still improvement, to be done, but it's a good year.
So who does the responsibility lie with? Does it lie with the offending worker or the actual owner of the farm?
Well, the message we try to get at, that everyone's responsible for knowing the consent. So all the way from the actual consent holder to the farm manager to the workers, we really want everyone to understand the conditions of the consent and how to abide by them.
What is the consent process around effluent systems?
Well, every consent looks at the adverse effects from say, the dairy effluent discharge on the environment and sets conditions in order to address those effects. In the Bay of Plenty region, we have a particular form for an application, and that is that requires certain amounts of information, and the consents team are happy to help farmers out through that. There are a lot of advisors, Dairy NZ and Fonterra, that can also help out. If all that information is supplied and the correct irrigation system is in place, it should normally take about less than a month to process.
So can members of the public report on bad effluent management?
Yes, we have a 24-hour hotline, a pollution prevention hotline, and members of the public can phone in about any incident or complaint. The number is 0800 884 883.
If you head to boprc.gov.nz, there is everything you need to know about effluent management and the services available, and of course the laws for the Bay of Plenty. Just ahead, the South Waikato.